In early 2025, President Donald Trump shocked the world by imposing a sweeping 10% tariff on nearly all goods imported into the United States. This bold move marked a dramatic shift in America's approach to global trade, signaling a new era of economic nationalism. The announcement sent shockwaves through international markets, with investors and trading partners scrambling to assess the impact. For decades, the U.S. had championed free trade, but this policy represented a sharp break from that tradition. The policy went even further, targeting 60 countries with higher, country-specific tariffs, creating a tangled web of trade barriers that complicated global commerce. These tariffs varied widely, with some countries facing steep penalties on key exports, while others scrambled to negotiate exemptions or new trade deals. The international response was swift, with many governments threatening retaliatory measures and warning of a potential trade war. The most dramatic escalation was with China. Tariffs on Chinese goods soared to as high as 145% on certain products. This unprecedented increase targeted a wide range of goods, from electronics to basic household items, and was designed to pressure China into making major concessions on trade practices. This move targeted everyday items, electronics, furniture, clothing, toys, directly impacting American retailers and families. Suddenly, products that had long been affordable became more expensive, and shoppers began to notice the difference at checkout. Retailers, already operating on thin margins, faced tough choices about whether to absorb the costs or pass them on to consumers. The administration claimed these tariffs would bring manufacturing jobs back and correct decades of unfair trade practices. Supporters argued that higher tariffs would encourage companies to invest in American factories, hire local workers, and reduce reliance on foreign suppliers. Trump insisted foreign exporters would pay the price, not Americans. He argued that the tariffs would force other countries to lower their own trade barriers and open their markets to U.S. goods, ultimately benefiting American workers and businesses. Economists and business leaders quickly countered, warning that U.S. companies would bear the costs, and likely pass them on to consumers. Many experts pointed out that tariffs often act as hidden taxes, raising prices for everyone and potentially slowing economic growth. The result: immediate uncertainty for businesses reliant on global supply chains, especially retailers. Companies struggled to adapt, facing delays, shortages, and rising costs as they tried to navigate the new trade landscape. With so many goods sourced from China, the retail sector braced for inevitable price hikes. Store managers and buyers scrambled to find alternative suppliers, but options were limited and often more expensive. The question was no longer if prices would rise, but when and by how much. For millions of American families, the impact was felt in their wallets as everyday essentials became less affordable. The stage was set for a collision between White House trade policy and the realities of the American marketplace, with the outcome uncertain and the stakes higher than ever for both businesses and consumers. Walmart, America's largest retailer and a symbol of everyday low prices, was hit hard by the sudden economic shift. The company's leadership wasted no time sounding the alarm, making it clear that the new tariffs would have far-reaching consequences not just for their business, but for millions of American families. Executives warned that the new tariffs would force price increases on a wide range of products, from electronics to groceries, household essentials, and even clothing. Everyday items that families rely on would soon cost more, stretching budgets even thinner. The company's low-price model, which had been its foundation for decades, was suddenly under threat. Absorbing the extra costs was not an option, and passing them on to customers seemed inevitable. In a move that shocked many, Walmart announced it would close stores in at least 7 states, targeting locations where rising costs and low profits made operations unsustainable. Communities that depended on these stores for jobs and affordable goods were left reeling. These closures marked a dramatic shift for a company known for relentless expansion and a presence in nearly every corner of the country. Walmart's warnings made the impact of tariffs real for millions of Americans: higher prices, lost jobs, and fewer shopping options. The ripple effects were felt in small towns and big cities alike. The debate over tariffs was no longer abstract. It was now about the cost of living and job security in communities across the country. Families gathered around kitchen tables, worried about how to make ends meet. The alarm had been sounded, and the consequences were immediate. News spread quickly, and uncertainty grew as people wondered what would come next. The nation watched as the fallout began to unfold, realizing that the effects of these changes would be felt for a long time to come. Walmart's closures sent shockwaves through 7 states, devastating local economies. In many small towns, Walmart was the main employer and source of affordable goods. Hundreds lost their jobs overnight, and families faced longer drives and higher prices for essentials. Local suppliers lost their biggest customer, triggering layoffs and even business closures. The economic ecosystem around Walmart began to unravel, threatening regional stability. Economists warned of a looming recession in these areas, as tax revenues fell and public services faced cuts. What began as a federal trade policy had become a crisis for American workers and communities. As Walmart raised prices and closed stores, a public clash erupted with the White House. The retail giant, known for its low prices, found itself in a precarious position, having to balance the increased costs due to tariffs with the expectations of its price-sensitive customers. President Trump lashed out on social media, accusing Walmart of greed and demanding they absorb the tariffs. He argued that a company as large and profitable as Walmart should be able to shoulder the burden without passing costs onto consumers. Walmart responded, explaining that absorbing such massive costs was impossible for a low-margin business. They emphasized that the tariffs were a significant financial strain, and passing some of these costs to consumers was unavoidable. The administration framed Walmart's actions as corporate greed, while Walmart and most economists argued tariffs are attacks on U.S. companies. Economists pointed out that tariffs disrupt supply chains and increase costs for businesses, which inevitably trickle down to consumers. The dispute became a symbol of the disconnect between political rhetoric and economic reality. While politicians made bold claims, the practical implications for businesses and consumers were far more complex and challenging. Trump's supporters saw Walmart as part of the problem, while business leaders warned that ignoring basic economics would only hurt consumers. The debate highlighted the differing perspectives on how best to handle the economic challenges posed by tariffs. The clash highlighted a fundamental truth. Tariffs, no matter the intention, have real costs for American businesses and families. From higher prices on everyday goods to the financial strain on small businesses, the impact was widespread and deeply felt. Walmart's public stance was both a defense and a warning. They cautioned that continued tariffs would lead to more store closures and higher prices, affecting millions of American consumers and workers. The debate over who pays for tariffs was no longer theoretical. It was playing out in stores and paychecks across the country. The tangible effects were visible in the form of empty shelves, altered price tags, and the financial strain on employees. The standoff became a national flashpoint. News outlets across the country covered the story extensively, turning it into a major topic of public discourse and debate. The consequences of the trade war were now impossible to ignore. The sight of closed stores and empty parking lots served as a stark reminder of the economic toll. The nation was forced to confront the true cost of protectionism. As families reviewed their bills and businesses struggled to stay afloat, the broader implications of the trade policies became painfully clear. The toy industry was hit especially hard, with 80% of U.S. toys made in China. Tariffs up to 145% threatened to wipe out American toy companies overnight. Huntar Company, a major supplier, saw orders collapse and laid off a third of its workforce, scrambling to move production to Vietnam. An industry survey found nearly half of small and mid-sized toy companies feared imminent closure. Retailers like Walmart and Target tried to absorb costs temporarily, but it was unsustainable. Major brands like Mattel announced price hikes ahead of the holiday season. The crisis made clear tariffs were pushing American businesses to the brink, and consumers would soon pay more. Economists warned from the start that broad tariffs would drive up prices and cost jobs, especially for low-income families. Walmart's closures became a case study in how tariffs act as a regressive tax. Politicians from affected states demanded federal aid and a rollback of the tariffs, turning trade policy into a domestic crisis. Local news was filled with stories of laid-off workers and struggling small businesses. The administration dismissed the backlash as fear-mongering, insisting the pain was necessary to rebuild U.S. manufacturing. The country was deeply divided. Some saw the tariffs as patriotic sacrifice, others as needless economic harm. For communities losing jobs and affordable goods, the damage was already done. The debate raged on, but the human cost was undeniable. In mid-May, a breakthrough, the US and China agreed to a 90-day reduction in tariffs, lowering rates on most Chinese goods to 30%. The business community breathed a sigh of relief, and stocks rebounded. Retailers and suppliers got a brief reprieve, but uncertainty lingered. And companies faced tough choices about moving supply chains or waiting for a permanent deal. For communities already hit by store closures, the damage was done. Jobs and stores weren't coming back overnight. The tariff truce prevented things from getting worse, but didn't undo the harm. The future of trade, and the fate of many businesses, remained uncertain. Negotiations continued, with high stakes for the entire economy. The path forward was still fraught with risk. By late October, the temporary truce had been extended, but uncertainty still gripped the economy. Retailers and suppliers hesitated to invest or hire, fearing tariffs could return at any moment. The scars from Walmart's closures lingered, many workers were still struggling, and local governments faced budget shortfalls. The crisis forced a national conversation about the risks of global supply chains and the true cost of protectionism. Moving manufacturing back to the US proved slow and expensive. The lesson was clear. There are no easy fixes in global trade, and tariffs can hurt at home as much as abroad. As the holiday season approached, the nation wondered if a lasting peace was possible, or if another tariff storm was on the horizon. The stakes for American families and businesses had never been higher.